Today I'm going to be covering an article from nationalgeographic.com. As you can see here on the website, it wants me to sign up for a subscription. However, given that this pertains to important health for biological women that normally doesn't get covered, I went to archive.com and got the article that way. Side note, please consider supporting them in their work. It's absolutely crucial to keep this important information out there and not behind a paywall. Again, the title is "The Menstrual Cycle Can Reshape Your Brain." I misspoke before and said how. The subtitle reads, "Studies show that the volume or thickness of certain brain regions expand during monthly periods, but they don't reveal whether that's connected to emotional fluctuations." Written by Sanjay Mishra on February 7th, 2024. To the left, we see an image scan that has the caption, "Colored Coronal Magnetic Resonance Imaging, parentheses, MRI, and parentheses, scan of the brain of a healthy premenopausal 32-year-old woman." A recent study in Nature Mental Health found that during the menstrual cycle, and here, that's where the capture cuts off. The photo is credited to Dr. P. Marazzi, Science Photo Library. I begin reading. Elma Jashim, a recent college graduate, is looking forward to beginning medical school in the fall, but she is also dreading the monthly emotional roller coaster that occurs with her menstrual cycle and the havoc it could wreak with her busy academic schedule. Quote, "For about 2-3 days before I begin my period, I kind of feel like, not really emotional, not particularly sad, but not particularly happy either," end quote, says Jashim. This mood plateau heightens Jashim's sensitivity to even small emotional stimuli when her menstruation begins. Quote, "If I'm at work and I make a very minor mistake, it almost sends me to the point of tears," end quote. What exactly happens in her brain that triggers these emotions isn't well understood, but progress is being made in visualizing how sex hormones can alter some areas of the brain. Previous studies in rats and other mammals, linked here, had already shown that the volume of specific brain regions can change in response to estrogen, a hormone required for normal sexual and reproductive development in women. But whether this potent hormone could alter the structure of the human female brain was unknown. Now, recent MRI scans of the brains of women show that the rise and fall of sex hormones during the menstrual cycle, the 29-day period of ebbing and flowing hormones that prepares the reproductive organs for a possible pregnancy, dramatically reshapes regions of the brain that govern emotions, memory, behavior, and the efficiency of information transfer. Quote, "It's amazing to see that the adult brain can change super fast," end quote, says Julia Saker, a psychiatrist and neuroscientist at Max Planck Institute for Human Cognitive and Brain Sciences in Leipzig, Germany, who led one of the studies, linked here. That the brain changes throughout the menstrual cycle is especially noteworthy because most women experience almost 450 menstrual cycles over 30 to 40 years, linked here, says Catherine Woolley, a neurobiologist at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. The strengths of these studies are that brain imaging and hormone measurements were done in the same individuals across specific phases of the menstrual cycle, says Woolley. Quote, "Through these studies, we now have this picture emerging of how potent these hormones are for shaping, not just brain morphology, but also the functional architecture," end quote, says Emily Jacobs, a neuroscientist at the University of California, Santa Barbara. Section, Hormones Drive the Menstrual Cycle. A menstrual cycle repeats every 25 to 30 days and begins with a, quote, "period," end quote, or the shedding of the lining of the uterus. The female sex hormone levels in the blood are lowest at the beginning of the cycle, but then rise steeply over the next few weeks. First, levels of estrogen rise, signaling the lining of the uterus to grow. Then estrogen levels fall to release an egg from the ovary, marking the midpoint of the menstrual cycle. After that, levels of progesterone and estrogen hormones increase again for about 7 days to prepare the lining of the uterus for the possible fertilization of the egg. If a pregnancy does not occur, both estrogen and progesterone levels fall back, initiating the period bleeding. While the menstrual cycle results from a pronounced seesaw of the hormone levels, other hormones such as testosterone and cortisol also cycle, rising before dawn and falling in the evening, linked here. These daily rhythms occurs in both sexes, linked here. Section: Estrogen stimulates cognitive brain regions. The brain is a dense mass of cells called neurons, each of which looks like a miniature tree. The gray matter, the outer layer of brain tissue, contains the neurons and their short branches called dendrites. Dendrites have leaf-like protrusions on them called spines. The roots, or the axons of the neurons, pack together in the white matter of the brain. While gray matter regulates emotion, learning, and memory, white matter deeper in the brain tissue exchanges information and connects different regions of gray matter. That parts of the brain that respond to the female sex hormones was first discovered almost 3 decades back. In 1990, Woolley serendipitously discovered that estrogen regulates the density of dendritic spines in the hippocampus of rat brains, linked here. Quote, "This was a very surprising result and produced considerable skepticism in the field," end quote, recalls Woolley. Quote, "At that time, estrogens were considered to be solely reproductive hormones and not to affect cognitive brain regions like the hippocampus," end quote. The hippocampus, the cognitive center of the brain that contains both gray and white matter, is a small curved structure buried deep in the brain behind the ears, in a region densely populated with sex hormone receptors. The hippocampus is also the region of an adult human brain that is most responsive to change in volume. Developing new skills, such as learning to juggle in old age, linked here, or studying maps to pass a London taxicab driving license exam, linked here, makes the hippocampus bigger. On the other hand, a shrinking hippocampus can be an early sign of dementia, linked here, particularly in Alzheimer's disease. Since Woolley's groundbreaking discovery, scientists have learned that menopause decreases volume of gray matter in some parts of the brain, linked here. However, research has been limited to just getting a snapshot of the brains of volunteers at a single time point. Scientists want to know if adult human brains change during the monthly rise and fall of sex hormones. Quote, "Can we really get precise? Can we get really precise? Can we take one person and measure their brain 30, 50, or 100 times?" End quote, wondered Jacobs. This prompted one scientist in Jacobs' group to get her own brain scanned every 24 hours for a whole month in 2020, linked here. Quote, "She was like the Marie Curie of neuroscience," end quote, says Jacobs. From the 30 scans of this one woman's brain, Jacobs' team found that sex hormones reshaped the hippocampus and reorganized the brain's connections. However, it wasn't clear how rapidly the waves of hormones during the menstruation cycle could do this. Note that the word rapidly is italicized. To address the question, the scientists in Leipzig and Santa Barbara have now independently scanned the brains of more than 50 women during multiple points during their menstrual cycles for 2 unrelated studies. Section: Thickness of brain regions fluctuates during the menstrual cycle. In one study, published in the journal Nature Mental Health, linked here, Saker's team used ultrasound to identify, they use the word identity here, but I believe they meant to say identify, the precise time of ovulation for 27 female volunteers. This enabled them to collect blood samples from volunteers at 6 precise points during their menstrual cycle that were linked to ovulation and hormone levels in the blood. Then they scanned the brains of these 27 women at 6 specific time points using ultra-high field MRI. By using this more powerful MRI than commonly employed in clinics, Saker's team could take images of the live brain with a resolution so high it was previously only possible by directly slicing the brain during a post-mortem. Even though it is a very small structure, the Saker team was able to observe a choreographed series of changes in different regions of the hippocampus as it remodeled in step with the menstrual cycle. The outer layer of the hippocampus got thicker, and the gray matter expanded with rising estrogen levels and falling progesterone. But when progesterone levels rose, the layer involved in memory expanded. Other research, not yet peer-reviewed, linked here, scanned the brains of 30 volunteers during ovulation, menstruation, and the duration between the two. This study found that not just the thickness of the gray matter, but also the structural properties of the white matter fluctuated under the hormone's cue. Quote, we applied kind of a ruler, parentheses, to gray matter, in parentheses, and saw it change in concert with the hormone fluctuations, end quote, says Elizabeth Reiser, who co-led this study with Victoria Babenko, both neuroscientists at the University of California, Santa Barbara. The study suggests that changes in white matter due to hormonal fluctuation leading up to ovulation could trigger more efficient information transfer across different parts of the brain. Quote, these changes are very widespread, not just in the gray matter, but also in the areas of the brain that are responsible for coordinating across regions and across white matter highways, end quote, says Babenko. However, the changes observed in the volume or thickness of the regions of the brain in these studies have not yet been associated with specific brain functions. While the studies show that certain areas of the brain can remodel themselves in concert with oscillations of hormones during the menstrual cycle, scientists caution these studies do not mean that memory or cognition is affected. Quote, we cannot say that bigger is better for particular brain functions or processes, end quote, says Woolley. The studies also don't reveal whether the volume changes are connected to the myriad emotional and cognitive symptoms women experience during their period. Note that the words don't reveal are italicized. In fact, these studies included only healthy women who did not report any of these symptoms. What these studies highlight is an urgency for more research to study women's unique neuroscience needs, says Jacobs. Quote, actual structural changes are happening in our brain that could be linked to the roller coasters, the mood swings, whatever it is, end quote, says Jashim. While women make up 70% of cases of Alzheimer's disease and 65% cases of depression, linked here, only about half of 1% of brain imaging research is related to women, linked here. This disparity continues even in drug approvals, such as lecanemab. Sorry for not pronouncing that right. Ugh. Which U.S. Food and Drug Administration recently approved for the treatment of early Alzheimer's disease, linked here, but it may not slow the disease in women, linked here. Quote, it's high time to make the brain a major focus of women's health, end quote, says Satcher. Here ends the article. Below that reads editor's note. The original article misstated the date when it was first discovered that parts of the brain that respond to female sex hormones. It was 1990. This concerns all of us, especially those of us in the United States. Research for women's specific medical studies is being underfunded or cut by the Trump administration. And the likelihood that it'll get the attention and the research and the money and the funding it needs is likely not going to happen, at least while we have this current president. Efforts must be made on all of our parts to protest this and to get funding reinstated for these kinds of programs, because women are people too and deserve this kind of treatment. We deserve to be seen as equals, as people, and as people that have different physiological needs. And because of our different physiological needs, we need to be studied and researched. If only the people that are currently in power actually saw us as such. Thanks for watching/listening, and I will see you in the next one.